So many moms feel stuck and isolated, like they've got to keep it all together and can't say how hard it really is. On Let's Get Real, we talk about the real stuff, motherhood, mental health, and everything in between, so you don't feel like you have to carry it alone anymore. Because in order to heal, we have to get real. If you're feeling overwhelmed, grab the Overwhelmed Moms Guide. It's totally free and made to help you feel like yourself again. The link is in the show notes. Let's jump in. Women today are navigating motherhood in a world that still clings to outdated expectations. Get married first, have kids second, and follow a perfectly linear path. But for so many women, that path doesn't unfold, or it falls apart completely. Infertility, age pressure, relationship disappointment, trauma, and unconventional family building leave women wondering, what if my motherhood story doesn't look like the fairy tale I was promised? Today, we're joined by Cheri Bergeron, fertility advocate, nonprofit founder, and best-selling author of Mission Motherhood, writing a new fairy tale of love and family. Cheri's 10-year journey into motherhood included foster parenting, multiple rounds of IVF, donor conception, genetic complications, premature birth, and heartbreaking child loss. And just when she thought the trauma had ended, she faced a precedent-setting Texas custody battle involving her legally separated spouse. Through these experiences, Cheri has become a powerful voice for rewriting the rules of motherhood. Cheri, thank you so much for being here today. I'm really looking forward to dive into this topic on rewriting the narrative of motherhood and looking at other ways that women can explore and become mothers other than the traditional fairy tale.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, me too. I'm really excited. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. Well, can you take us back to the beginning of your motherhood journey, what you believe that life should look like before everything changed?
Well, as women, I think we come into adulthood and we don't even realize some of the messages that we've received. I think on one end, I had a traditional family with a stay-at-home mom. And so, I thought that was sort of the structure, that you get married, you have kids and all of that. But at the same time, I grew up in the 70s with feminism, and it was like, we earned the right to, I am woman, hear me roar, you can go be whatever you want to be. And so I was carrying both of those messages simultaneously and not necessarily realizing the challenges that might come in blending both of those things. And as a strong, ambitious woman, sometimes it can be really difficult to find the right kind of partner that is looking for a strong, independent, financially independent woman that kind of goes against a lot of their upbringing as well as provider and things. And so it may take a little longer to find that right partner. And so those are the messages I carried into adulthood. And then as you're trying to, that's my fairy tale, if you will, that two-sided fairy tale. And as you move forward, sometimes life doesn't work that way. And so as I got into my phase, I really started to see those struggles of trying to make that dual fairy tale work out for me.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I think the picture you're painting is still, I feel like, very common, even if it's not as loud maybe, or it's not as overt as it was with you growing up. But I still think that there is the tension of those things that seem to not be able to coexist. And really, you either have the traditional route, you said, growing up in the traditional type of family, or you're this fierce, independent woman who can do it all on her own. But then there's just this middle ground that I don't think is really explored or talked much about, because that's kind of where we can feel trapped. It's like the either or, this or that, and we have to choose or pick one or the other, when that isn't necessarily the case. And I think that's so much of your message.
Drive ourselves crazy trying to have both at the same time. That's the other thing, because we're told, don't have kids before you're ready. And you've got plenty of time. And biology doesn't always say that's true. And you can have it all. And I think those messages create both a false sense of security for women, as well as sort of this expectation that really kind of drives us all into the ground, I think, because we can't be everything to everyone all at the same time. And so I think those messages are still very strong, and why you see women kind of pulling their hair out and having burnout and really feeling maybe at their core dissatisfied with what they feel they've gotten the fairy tale, but it doesn't feel like a fairy tale existence.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's so true. And again, I'm even noticing the shift in these narratives, right? Which I feel still create this a trap in a way, because it's not really grounded in reality. It's not true to our limits as humans. And you said, considering biology, considering the real facts, and then demystifying, you can't have it all at the same time and be everything to everyone. That is humanly impossible. So then you just kind of are realizing that you feel like you're a failure. There's all the shame that sets in of what is wrong with me if I can't do X, Y, and Z, and I'm supposed to. It's just these crazy expectations. But it is just interesting noticing how they'll shift and change in ways, but they're still there where we just can't quite do it, or we feel we're missing the mark, or it doesn't align with what we know we're desiring.
And who's the one person that we then feel to show up for? Ourselves, right? And so we feel completely depleted, and either our physical health or our mental health suffers. And so I really think there is just a more broad need to change that narrative and give women a bit of a break. I had to come to those conclusions myself and realize that what I chose to do was step back from, say, the intensity of my career, sort of the climbing the corporate ladder, in order to be the kind of mother that I wanted to be. And for me, that meant remote work. For other women, maybe that means entrepreneurism so that they can set their own schedules. Or sometimes it may mean taking a break. I mean, and there's no wrong choice in any of that.
Yeah, right. And it's helpful to hear that there are many options, and it's not a right path or the mold or the fit that then you are supposed to go down. It's evaluating and saying, reconnecting with yourself in those moments and being like, what is it that I really desire? What are the things I'm wanting? And then what things or also what are some of these higher priorities that then will require some readjusting in these other areas of my life. And that is not supposed to be a one size fits all. It is meant to be unique and tailored to each person.
Right.
So I'm really glad that you're speaking to this. And so I'm curious if you kind of walk us through being able to be, okay, I'm going to pursue a career, climb the corporate ladder, and then at what point were you like, okay, I want to have kids, and what does this look like? How did that part unfold?
Yeah. Well, I didn't just climb the corporate ladder. I sort of sprinted up it. I was very proactive, ambitious, and I rose pretty quickly. But then what I found was that the higher that I got in the organization, I wasn't always that pleased by the behaviors that I saw. And in fact, I was in a very male-dominated industry. And I looked around and I said, when you got to the mountaintop, wow, this is what the view looks like from here. I'm not quite sure that satisfies me. And it was really in my 30s that I started dating some people that had children. I didn't have a sort of innate sense that I wanted to be a mother. I knew I wanted financial independence and things. I got a lot from growing up with strong men in my family. And when I started to engage with children, that triggered something in me. And I don't know, maybe that happens to other women. And so in my phase, I really came to that conclusion. Yes, I do want children, but then I couldn't, find the guy. And so that's really when I think women get the pressure of their biological clock, and they think, okay, well, if I'm rooted to this one model where I have to find a man in order to be entitled to have a child, then I better make that happen. And for ambitious women, I think sometimes that means that we end up maybe not being as thorough in evaluating the partnership that we want. Settling is another way that we think about it. I say that I married someone who looked good on paper, and so I kind of called him more Prince Convenient than Prince Charming. And that, for me, did not work out very well. That may work out for some women. For me, the foundation wasn't as compatible as I would have wanted it to be.
Yeah, in that place of being, okay, I'm at the point where I know I want kids, and then you just feel, okay, the blaring alarm clock of, okay, what people talk about, like your clock is ticking, that is blaring in my head. So this outcome, this is the outcome I'm wanting and desiring. And what I know of how to get there is through finding a man that I then marry, and then we conceive and have a child or children. And so it's easy when we have that knowing this is the outcome or the result of what I'm really wanting, which is children. So it's easy to then overlook and not realize some of those other necessary qualities in a spouse, because it's, well, this man is going to help me reach this dream that I have.
Exactly.
But then we don't realize the other, it's just very easy to look over, right? Because, just because of what that does and just the growing like desire of being able to be a mom.
But
and
also then you're going to be, I'm going to make that happen.
Yes.
And this seems to be, okay, let me look at my spreadsheet. Okay, this looks pretty good. So, and red flags, well, maybe they're pink, I'm not really going to pay all that much attention because I'm driven towards that goal. And so I think that really happens to career women, that we feel this sense of urgency at the one hand and determination at another hand, and we are get it done kind of people. And so then you end up maybe in this relationship that's not as fulfilling as you would want. And the peril there is, yes, you might get those children, but one, are you satisfied? And two, what effect does this have on your children? And in my situation, my choices had a profound impact on both of my children, even though we only share one child together.
Yes, exactly. Again, these are easy things to miss, or it can just be disguised. And then especially when you do have kids, or you're in the midst of trying to have children, that's when things really get revealed. But that's typically after you've made the commitment and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in this.
Right.
Do you mind sharing just what some of those red flags were that you're like, whoa, this is something that was really hurtful and something that I missed, but it really impacted the rest of the process of just like being in that relationship and like getting out of it eventually and all of that. I think it's helpful to kind of hear, these are something to keep in mind or to know or to not ignore.
Yeah. Prior to marriage, some of the things were one kind of a over-attachment, I think more of a codependent relationship with their mother was one piece. Okay. And then the second really for me was that he wasn't necessarily nurturing his career as much as I was. I don't think we were aligned around that. And that's one of the key issues for a lot of couples, is that if you're the predominant earner and then you want to have a child and step back, if your partner isn't able to carry that financial load, then you're looking at either not having children, which was something he suggested, which just blew my mind because I always thought we were aligned on that, or really reducing your lifestyle. And certainly that can be fine, but sometimes that feels like a heavy cost as well. And so to me, financial issues are one of the biggest ones with couples. And those were some of the red flags that I sort of ignored in our 10-month courtship, which I think wasn't long enough. But then when you get into marriage, you're right. And when you're struggling with infertility, that takes a toll on both people. We hadn't really experienced that kind of emotional trauma prior to marriage. And so one of the hardest things that a couple can go through is the loss of a child, whether it's a miscarriage or whether it's later on. For me, I had a medical termination, which was at almost 6 months. And you really find out when you've got some kind of intense grief how compatible you are and whether you're going to support each other or whether you're going to fracture. So there were really a lot of things for us, and I, of course, go into it in great detail in the book, but our relationship didn't start with a great foundation, and then some of these life events in the early years of our marriage kind of chipped away at that.
Yes, gosh, thank you for sharing. Just like you said, it doesn't take once you do have children for these things to be revealed, but especially going through traumatic situations, especially like losing a child. It reveals like the fracture lines that are in the foundation that were there the whole time, but now they're magnified because it just has a way of illuminating that. When you go through something so awful like that, I was thinking about how a place that I love, I've been there before and I highly recommend it for everyone or anyone who is interested, but it's called On-Site. It's basically I call it a mental health retreat. They do intensives and all of that. But one of the things that they talk about there is how the worst type of trauma somebody can go through is losing a child. That is the worst. And that is when you need so much support and working through the immense amount of grief and just what you go through with that. So, and I know you're saying that's been part of your process in the fertility journey and getting there. Do you mind sharing a little bit more about what that process was for you and with you and your spouse at the time, but when you're like, hey, I really want to have kids, like what did that journey look like for you?
Well, It was a windy road. So we got married. I was 36, tried to have children naturally, and really that wasn't happening. We then tried to become foster parents, or we actually became foster parents, and we had a child with us for 7 months, and unfortunately she was not able to stay. And so that was really our first loss. And it turns out that when that happened, he was out of the country. And so that was one of the first things that circumstantially I was going through this tremendous loss, and he was not there. And then we enter into this whole fertility process. And really, women bear the lion's share of the burden in an IVF process and things like that. We're hopped up in all our hormones and things like that. And from my perspective, the men have a pretty easy job in that process. Won't go into a whole bunch of detail on that, but there's their contributions a couple minutes, and our lives are sort of completely disrupted. One of the things is I sought fertility at the age of 40. So my egg quality was not something that we felt was very high. And so I chose to use an egg donor. And I was really surprised to learn that if I used the eggs of a 27-year-old, that even at 40, my odds of a healthy child were about the same as hers. And that was mind-blowing to me, because egg freezing really wasn't viable when I was in my 30s. It was still experimental. And so that was amazing. And okay, we have every reason to believe that this is going to be a healthy pregnancy. And then at your 20-some week sonogram to find out that your child's condition is incompatible with life is a real sucker punch for both people, especially when you have been so intentional and deliberate in trying to do the things that would create a healthy child. And up until that point, there was no indication that there were really any issues. And so that is getting hit by a semi truck kind of from the side. And then you're in a multi-day process of knowing that you're going to be saying goodbye to this child that you've never even met. And I was sitting in that, and he was completely incapable of engaging. And so he retreated. And here I am carrying his child and feeling completely abandoned. And so I think that was a huge turning point, a negative turning point in our relationship. And then when we decided, well, I knew I wanted to try again, we weren't necessarily on the same page. And so really that was when I decided I was going to be pursuing an independent pregnancy, sort of as a single mother by choice, because I knew I was not going to miss this opportunity for motherhood. And so that's really when we started to go our separate ways.
Okay. Wow. That is a lot to go through, something like that. So traumatic. It's not even difficult. This is traumatic and just something you would never wish on anyone to have to go through, but to feel alone in that and to be like, I really don't have a partner. He wasn't there physically the first time, I would imagine, not emotionally, but the first time with the foster child that you guys did have, and then to go through something like that and to feel so alone where it's like, this is meant to be a partnership and you can't show up for me, because it is a lot, and just a lot on your heart and your emotions as a human, let alone the added component of all the extra progesterone and all the hormones that are flowing going through the IVF process. Like, you add that, it's a multiplication effect on top of all of the grief.
It is.
Yeah.
I think I don't often give my ex a lot of charity because it was a very, very long road, and there was much more to come after this. But I do acknowledge that people grieve differently, and that's why I think this is the hardest thing for couples to go through. And I think men feel very helpless. And I mean, because it's a helpless feeling for both parties, but if a man at all feels they want to be the protector, and here their wife and child are in a condition that they cannot protect, I could imagine that would face, that would be difficult for a lot of men to deal with. And you'd really have to be a strong, emotionally intelligent man to be able to be there for your wife. So if there are men listening who have been through this and have shown up for their wives, oh my gosh, I commend you so much. You guys are real men that I admire.
Yes, exactly. And it is difficult because in our culture, first of all, men are told to just shove it down, and the only permissible feeling is anger. That's about it. And so with grief, also in our culture, we do not do a good job at all being able to navigate and learn how do we let ourselves grieve, because it is expressed differently for other people, but everybody, but it's also suppressed for so many people where they don't let themselves express it and feel it because we just don't know how to do that. Like, we don't know how to navigate this. And it's remarkable to me to think that hearing how you recovered after that, and you're like, there's still an element of hope in the midst of the grief that happened, hope that you could try again and experience this dream fulfilled and realize there is another way. I'm just thinking of your mindset and the thoughts that you had, the shift, or just what led you to even perceive that there was still another possibility, realizing it wasn't going to be with him, but I could still experience this dream.
Well, to me, this was my uber career woman coming out, because when we're in the workplace, we get faced with obstacles all the time, and we have to be creative in figuring out how we're going to do this. And so I would say, perseverance, resilience, stubbornness comes to mind. And at that point, I was going to become a mother sort of with or without you. And I believe that this is my purpose. I believe that I will not feel fulfilled as a person and leave a lasting legacy if I don't experience this. And by the way, that's not true for everyone. I'm not saying that every woman should feel that way, but that's the way that I felt. And that is really what caused me to press forward. And I will say, I did not heal at that time. I sort of pushed those feelings to the side and kept going. And it was only later, after I had my children, I realized that I needed to do some personal work so I could be the mom that I wanted to be for them and be more of a whole person.
Right. Wow. That's so good. And I feel like a lot of times kids have a way of revealing those things too. And even in the midst of that, of going through loss, it's like, I know what I'm wanting still, and I can recover enough to go pursue the next step. And wow, it's remarkable to hear about your pursuit of what are these other ways to be able to experience this desire that I have. And just being like, this is the original way I thought it would happen. It didn't. Here's another option with fostering. Then that wasn't going to work out long term. Here's another option with getting an egg donor, and then here's another option with sperm donor, right? Being like you've continued to just in the process, but you didn't start out knowing all of that. There was no way that you knew that, or you shared that. I've listened to some of your other podcasts that you've been on, but you didn't know those other options existed.
I didn't. And that's really why I started Cheri's Choice, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, but it's the nonprofit that I have so that I can provide information to women, and really it's part of a exploration of what your values are, and then understanding what all the options are, because motherhood is truly a journey of love. And whether it comes easily or whether it's hard won the way it was for me, as women, we have to just navigate that path and figure out what the right options are for us, what the next best step is to take. And that's really what Cheri's Choice is about.
Yes, I love that. And I definitely want to dive into that more as well, and which we will here shortly, because I want people to know where they can go for the resources that you provide as they're exploring this. Something you just mentioned was talking about the values that they have. And I think that is so important, because our values, they're connected to what matters to us. They are the expressions of the things that matter. So I think exploring that and having someone like you to guide them and be helping them understand what this then can look like in their life, and building that out by understanding the things that really do matter to them, and how that will look different and specific to each person. What would you say are some of the biggest myths that women are taught about fertility and motherhood?
Well, again, I think the first one is to say that you've got plenty of time. When I sat in the fertility doctor's office at 40, and he showed me a chart from the CDC that I have in the book that shows how our fertility starts to decline in our 30s, even in our early 30s, and really falls off a cliff in our late 30s, I didn't have that information, and I'm sitting here thinking, I'm an educated woman, I'm a capable woman. How did I miss this message? And it's because I was carrying that false narrative of, hey, you've got plenty of time. And so my encouragement to women is to be more proactive about their journey to motherhood. Now there are things like egg freezing that I think can prolong your options if you are intent on having biological children. But I don't want any other woman to be blindsided by that kind of information the way that I was. And I would say then that other one that we've touched upon is, I'd say a second one is that pregnancy is going to come easily because we're told don't get pregnant prematurely. And so then we think, okay, well, when I get off the pill or whatever, it's going to be wham bam and I'm going to be pregnant. It doesn't always work that way. I think and as you get older, even less so. And then I think the third would be that once you're pregnant, that things are all going to go smoothly. And the reality is 1 in 4 pregnancies ends in loss, either before you know that you're pregnant or in miscarriage after you have identified that you're pregnant. And so all of these things really blindside women because we're not prepared for the fact that all the things that can happen along the way.
Yeah, gosh, that's super helpful to hear because I think it helps women to be able to hear the reality to help understand really how things work, like biologically with like the things that really aren't talked about. Because I think you're right. It does swing from one side of like, don't get pregnant. Do everything you can to prevent it. You don't want to have that happen prematurely early on to then all of a sudden it's like, no, you're getting, you're too old or now we're going to have geriatric pregnancies. And there's just not the understanding. I feel like it helps to know the truth, the facts around this and understand realistically what to expect, because that's where it just helps so much with the heartache even, and to prepare and plan and be like, okay, this is what I'm wanting. Here's where I'm at. This is where I'm at in life, whether I have a relationship or not, in my career. So I can start putting things in place and creating a plan incrementally, right? As we progress and continue to see where we're at in life at different stages. For the woman who is listening, who may feel off track because her life doesn't look like she imagined, what would you want her to know and understand about non-linear motherhood?
Well, the first thing that I would do is send a big virtual hug through the internet waves. And if you believe it's your purpose to become a mother, then I absolutely believe that you can make that happen. And so I'm wanting to reassure every woman out there who's feeling that way that is possible. And I always say that with knowledge, courage, determination, and a village that loves you, anything is possible. So please carry that forward. I think the other thing is the importance of getting really clear on what your non-negotiables are. So for some women, they would rather forego motherhood than go it alone without a partner. Some people feel that way. What I have seen is that if you force fit a relationship, that can create problems. If you pursue motherhood first, that doesn't mean you're going to be single forever. A lot of people think that if I become a single mother, then I'm single forever. Well, how many blended families do we have out there? Mm-hmm. And the fact is that there are, depending on your values, you may choose motherhood first and then allow love to find you in its own time. And if you did it that way, yes, you may have a little pause while you're in the early childhood years, but you would have the advantage of being whole and looking at the partnership based upon the merits of it alone and not being clouded this urgent need to have children.
Yes. So then you can focus more on the quality of the relationship, which is so key because that is in itself, that's its own unit and thing that has to be established and developed and really just strong on its own, separate from all of that. And you're so right about having it clouded out. I think that's so true. And I'm really glad that you even spoke these other options since you have experienced motherhood as a single mom. I'm curious what you have found to be really helpful in creating the support that you've needed, because that can be a really common hurdle of how logistically, practically, how can I do this on my own? And we hear, okay, you need a village, which is true, but I'm just thinking practically, what did building out that support look like for you to help you stand, to help you still be able to continue in your career, even if that looked different once you were a single mom, but practically speaking, what were some of the support structures that you put in place to help you and the kids?
Well, one thing is that another fairy tale is that your biological family is going to be your source of support. I hope that's true for people, but in my case, some of my biological family members were not supportive at all. There were religious views that came into play, very conservative religious views, and we really had a rift over this because I wasn't willing to forego motherhood because someone thought that I was going against God or playing God or something like that. I truly believe I was partnering with God on this path, but my mother was incredible and still is an incredible source of support, and I'm so grateful for that. She was a wonderful role model of what motherhood should be and continues to be in my life and in the life of my children. But I would say that even a two-parent household needs a big village, because a single parent, yes, but even a two-parent household, we make a mistake to think that you don't need a big village. And so as a single mother, I was far more intentional in my outreach to create that village. So for example, I had neighbors who were an older couple, and it turns out they had never had children. In fact, the husband didn't want children, the wife did. She thought he would change, he didn't. And they lived next door to us, and it turns out that they became very central to my children's lives. And it was a blessing, not just for us, but also for them. Colleen was her name. She was able to experience sort of a mother kind of relationship with my children that she didn't have herself. And so this is kind of that bigger village. The benefits of that bigger village is it's not just being needy and sort of having people help you. It's the mutual giving that happens. And then having women older in life has some advantages. I was able to have a nanny, and that nanny became very close to my family. And in fact, I am now the godparent of her children. Wow. She's the godparent of my children. And so to me, this really speaks to the fact that family are the people who support you, the people who accept you and love you unconditionally, and that may or may not be your biological family. And so I think we need to open up our idea of truly what family means to us and be open to some of those relationships that are outside of biology.
Oh, good. I'm really glad that you shared those specific examples, because getting stuck in these ideals, or the ideals that we have, whether a lot of times you had said it wasn't even necessarily said directly, but they could be modeled for us. So it's the ideals we have because of what was modeled or in our culture, and it's the underlying narrative that keep us stuck and unable to see other options and possibilities. Where if we don't have family around, because that is the case for a lot of people, either they don't have family around or they don't have the relationships with their family members, or they're unable to be able to step in and help in the ways that we need. So it's easy to think, well, I guess that's it. It's all on me. And then that's when we crumble, burn out, and we become like just a worse version of ourselves as moms, which impacts our kids. Instead of being able to see and open up and be like, it's less than ideal. It's not what I wanted or wish would be, but this is where I'm at, and this is what it
actually did become ideal, because these people were just so cherished to me. What wasn't ideal to me is that the people in my biological family that I thought would support me could have, but weren't able to due to differences in beliefs. And so we shouldn't judge ourselves, and we shouldn't limit ourselves to sort of these restrictive kind of viewpoints. There's a lot of love out there and a lot of good people out there. Single mothers, even some single mothers create communities with one another, for example. Mm-hmm. And that can be amazing. And so let's not prejudge what that will look like. Again, this is a journey of love, both before we have our children and after. And if we're open to that, some amazing things can happen.
Yeah, exactly. An important point, because it's just helpful to see being open to see other possibilities and not being stuck in our previous ideals that don't currently exist. It then allows for more opportunities, more doors to be open, and more people available to be able to help us in the ways that we need. Like, we're able to then receive it, which is huge. And then you said that can become an ideal, and that's grounded in reality of the help that you have, the people available who are there to support you, which is significant.
It's not just that we're receiving. To me, I go into those relationships with what I can give. And so it's really a virtuous giving cycle. And because I know that I've enriched the lives of those other extended family members in ways that have been incredible for them too. So I think some women say, well, I don't want to ask for help because I'm strong and I don't want to ask for help. But what if your love and generosity could change their lives? And so that's a very different way to look at it.
Yes, exactly. And just seeing as that example you gave with the older couple, you're giving the gift of them having these basically adopted grandchildren, and she longed for and didn't get to have biologically. And that's the gift for her, where there is the giving and the receiving. It's mutually beneficial in different ways. And it may not be in the way that we think it has to be, but it's in the way that each person does need it, which is beautiful.
It is.
So as we are coming to an end and a close, I would love for you to share more about your organization, just what resources you do provide, just so people can hear what's available for them to reach out if they find themselves in a situation like this.
Sure. Well, my book, Mission Motherhood, was really about my journey, and it goes through all these twists and turns. And the message there is, if this woman can go through all of this and have the family of her dreams kind of at the end, then so can I. Mm-hmm. But then Cheri's Choice, my nonprofit, is really about how do you activate that for other women and make their paths maybe smoother than mine was. I mean, I have at the end of my book a girlfriend's advice on what I would wish I had known when I started this journey. And so I think that there are some key learnings there. And really through workshops and community support and the speaker series that I have, I am looking to inform and inspire and help women navigate this journey for themselves, knowing that there's no wrong answer and that each woman's journey to motherhood is as unique as her fingerprint. And I just want every woman who wants the opportunity to become a mother to know that there is a path for her.
Gosh, I love that. That's so amazing. And where can people find you? Is there a website, or are you on social media just to connect and learn more?
Yes, I hope we'll share those links and in your show notes. But the book is available on Amazon. Cheri's Choice is my first name with an S on the end, and then choice.com. Easy to find, and I am on the popular social media channels as well.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Cheri, for having this conversation and taking the time to be here today. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I've loved chatting with you, and I hope people will reach out, because infertility is a very isolating thing, and it really helps to know that there are other people who have walked this or are walking it now, and you're not alone in that struggle. So I hope people will reach out.
Yes, me too. Please do. Well, if this conversation encouraged you, please share it with a friend who needs to hear it, and remember that you are not alone. Thank you so much for listening, friend. I cannot wait to talk with you next time. Thanks for listening to Let's Get Real. If you've been feeling stretched thin, stuck in survival mode, or like you've lost yourself in motherhood, I made something just for you. It's called the Overwhelmed Mom's Guide, and it's totally free. Inside, I walk you through simple steps to help you reconnect with who you are, find a bit more breathing room in your day, and start to feel like you again. You can grab it now. Just click the link in the show notes. You don't have to keep doing this alone. Let's take the next step together.